Welcome back to Klepper's Corner, today in history. It's January 27th, a date that somehow manages to hold more history than my high school curriculum, which, granted, mostly consisted of dodgeball and a substitute named Mr. Thompson, who insisted the War of 1812 was probably a typo. But today, January 27th, this day is a historical Costco. Everything's in bulk. Liberation? Check. Diplomacy? Check. Space treaties? 2-for-1 special. Mozart? Why not? Augustus? Toss him in the cart. Edison inventing the light bulb to see what he's eating in that cart? Absolutely. So buckle up, because today we're jumping between millennia faster than a presidential staff jumped ship during a scandal. Segment 1, Liberation and Memory, Auschwitz and the weight of January 27th. January 27th holds the kind of gravity you don't joke your way around. You joke your way through, carefully, while acknowledging that this is one of the darkest pages in human history. On this day in 1945, the Soviet 322nd Rifle Division reached Auschwitz-Birkenau and opened the gates to a horror the world still struggles to fully comprehend. Imagine being a soldier, thinking you've seen war at its worst, and then pushing open those gates. Suddenly, you're not in a battlefield. You're in the smoking ruins of humanity's moral failure. And yet, amidst the devastation, there were survivors. 7,000 souls who had endured the unendurable. 7,000. That's the population of a small town. A town that had once held over 1 million people. And that's why January 27th became International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Not because we need a calendar reminder to care about our fellow humans, but because apparently we do. Humans forget things, sometimes big things, sometimes never forget things. So the UN said, okay, we're going to put this on the calendar, right between New Year's resolutions we'll ditch and whatever national flavor of chocolate day. Every year, the theme changes. One year, it's about survivors. Another year, it's about children. And in 2024, it was about courage. Because if you made it through Auschwitz, courage wasn't optional. It was the air, the ground, the heartbeat. Courage was survival. January 27th forces us to remember not just the liberation, but the cost of forgetting. It says, hey, humanity, let's not do genocide again. Ever. Like, seriously. Pinky promise. Segment 2, Siege, Survival, and the Breaking of Leningrad. And just 1 year earlier, January 27th, 1944, another liberation. Leningrad. A siege so brutal, so long, so cold, and so starve you until you're chewing your boots horrifying that it makes the Minnesota winter look like a light dusting. The siege of Leningrad lasted 872 days. That's not a siege. That's 2.5 years of your city being on an all-you-can't-eat diet, courtesy of the Wehrmacht. Over 1 million civilians died. 1 million. Try wrapping your head around a death toll so large it would give your calculator trauma. But on January 27th, the Soviets finally broke the blockade. It's a moment Russians still hold sacred, a symbol of endurance, resilience, and the human ability to say, no, you can't wipe us out. Also, please pass the bread. Literally, any bread. All the bread. January 27th isn't just liberation, it's survival. It's a reminder that even in the worst conditions imaginable, humans cling to life like it's the last working charger in a room full of iPhones. Segment 3, Diplomacy and Disillusion, the Paris Peace Accords. Shift ahead to 1973. January 27th becomes Let's Try Diplomacy Day, starring the United States, North Vietnam, South Vietnam, and the Viet Cong, all trying to end a war that had become the geopolitical equivalent of your uncle refusing to leave after Thanksgiving. The Paris Peace Accords were supposed to end the Vietnam War, and technically, they did, on paper, if you squinted, and ignored everything that happened for the next 2 years. Kissinger and Le Duc Tho hammered out the agreement. Thieu didn't want to sign, and the U.S. wanted out so badly it basically said, look, we just need enough time between us leaving and everything falling apart so we can say, see, we didn't lose, they did. Cue the decent interval. Cue the awkward Nobel Peace Prize. Cue Le Duc Tho saying, I'm not accepting this, the war isn't over. Cue Kissinger accepting his, because of course he did. And sure enough, by the time American troops withdrew, the ceasefire was already unraveling like a sweater bought at a gas station. Saigon fell in 1975. The war ended, but the trauma didn't. Not for the Vietnamese, not for the Americans, not for the generations that followed. January 27th hands us another reminder. Diplomacy can end a war, but it can't erase one. Segment 4. Space-age duality. Treaties by day, tragedy by night. January 27, 1967 is the most whiplash-inducing date on this list. Because in the morning, the US, UK, and USSR signed the Outer Space Treaty, a document that basically said, okay, space is cool, but let's not ruin it with nukes or real estate speculation. The treaty declared no weapons of mass destruction in orbit, no claiming the moon, no military bases on Mars, no calling dibs on Jupiter just because you got there first. It was humanity at its best, thoughtful, cooperative, forward-looking. And then, mere hours later, Apollo 1. A test, a spark, a fire. 3 astronauts, Gus Grissom, Ed White, Roger Chaffee, gone in seconds. It was NASA's darkest day, and one of the most important, because the fire forced everything to change. The hatch design, the atmosphere, the insulation, the wiring, the safety culture. The phrase, "we will never forget," became, "we will never forget," and also, "we will fix everything so it never happens again." The moon landing of 1969 didn't just happen because of rocket fuel and math. It happened because of 3 men who never made it off the ground. January 27th reminds us that progress isn't a straight line. It's a staircase built on triumphs and tragedies in equal measure. Segment 5, Empires and Upheaval. Augustus, Trajan, and Justinian's meltdown. Let's go back, way back. Before light bulbs, before treaties, before Kissinger. January was a very busy month for emperors. In 27 BC, Octavian did the political equivalent of saying, no, I don't need all this power, while winking hard enough to alter weather patterns. The Senate said, sure, Augustus, here's even more power, buddy. And boom, the Roman Empire was born. Fast forward to 98 AD. Trajan steps in. First emperor born outside Italy, adopted because merit mattered, novel concept. Trajan expands the empire to its greatest size, builds infrastructure, establishes welfare programs, and generally behaves like the CEO every company wishes they had instead of Greg, who still doesn't understand email attachments. And then, in 532 AD, Justinian has what historians now call the world's deadliest sports riot, the Nika riots. Chariot fans, greens and blues, decide that disagreeing about horse racing rules should escalate into burning half of Constantinople down. 30,000 people killed because of chariot racing. Meanwhile, modern sports fans throw folding chairs if their team trades a kicker. Justinian regains control, builds the Hagia Sophia as if to say, sorry about the massacre, here's some beautiful architecture, and codifies Roman law into a system that still influences modern legal codes. January 27th is a highlight reel of empire building, burning, and rebuilding. Basically, everything except a Netflix adaptation starring Chris Hemsworth. Segment 6, Genius, Innovation, and the Human Spark. Mozart, Peril, Edison, Saigon Tunnel, iPad. Now we hit the greatest hit station of human creativity. January 27th is Mozart's birthday. Wolfgang Amadeus, child prodigy whose resume is better than all of ours combined, Mozart. He wrote symphonies at 5. At 5, I was eating glue. He composed masterpieces that still sell out concert halls. At 5, I was banned from art class. Lewis Carroll, born January 27, 1832. A mathematician who wrote stories that feel like he licked a psychedelic toad and said, let's put a rabbit in pants and make him late. Wonderland is so weird it makes modern politics look coherent. Then we have Thomas Edison's 1880 patent for the incandescent lamp, the first one that actually worked long enough to be useful. The man didn't invent the light bulb, but he did invent the version that kept people from working in the dark like Victorian coal mine raccoons. January 27th also gave us the Saigon Tunnel breakthrough. Japan saying, "We see your mountains and your ocean, and we raise you a 54-kilometer tunnel under all of it." That's engineering so impressive, it makes American infrastructure look like it's held together with duct tape and excuses. And in 2010, Steve Jobs walks on stage, lifts the first iPad, and the world collectively says, "Is it a phone? Is it a laptop? Is it a plate?" And Jobs says, "It's magic." And everyone nods, because when Steve Jobs said something was magic, we believed him. January 27th is basically a TED Talk delivered by the entire sweep of human civilization. In conclusion, January 27th isn't just a date, it's a mirror. It shows us liberation and loss, genius and failure, treaties and tragedies, emperors and astronauts, music and memory. It says, here is humanity, broken, brilliant, dangerous, resilient, ridiculous, miraculous. It reminds us that history is not a straight line, but a very messy scribble drawn by billions of people trying their best, their worst, and everything in between. And on January 27th, all of those scribbles intersect.